Hi everyone, welcome to Wheel of Mind, the Wheel of Time point of view reread podcast. This season we're reading Matt Cawthon's perspective. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 24. I'm your co-host, Lajara Dane of the White Aja.
Hi, and I'm Giskel Cimaris, a scholar from Ilion. Now, if you are a new listener to the Wheel of Mind, I want to urge you to finish reading the entire series before listening to this podcast, as we will discuss anything from any part of the series without any further spoiler warnings. Now, with your permission, Lajara Sadai, I will get us started with a summary of Chapter 19, entitled 3 Women.
Go for it.
Walking over to the wandering woman to check on his gold, thoughts of losing it had been tugging at his mind. Matt was greeted coldly by Mara, Mistress Anand's oldest daughter. The common room was overly full anyway, so Matt chose to wait in the kitchen. Enid did greet Matt warmly, but laughed at his situation with Tylan. Blood and bloody ashes. Everybody really did know. Matt had just decided that his fears for the gold were unwarranted, and that he should go back to talk to Eludra. Why had he even been worried in the first place? But Enid handed him a platter of gilded fish when he praised her cooking as being better than that at the palace, without having to lie. And Eludra could wait for just a little bit. So just as he finished the last bite of his breakfast, Satel Anand came in the back door with another woman, both with their cloaks up due to the rain. The innkeeper was glad to see Matt, and had Enid clear the kitchen so that they could talk. When the room was clear, the visitor took off her cloak. It was an Aes Sedai, Jolene Maza. She seemed as surprised as Matt to learn that Mistress Anand had hoped that Matt could smuggle Jolene out of the city. Just then there was a commotion as Enid tried to prevent some Seanchan from entering the kitchen. Too late to hide Jolene, Matt grabbed her, sat her down quickly in his lap, and began kissing her to hide her face. Shocked, it only took Jolene seconds to realize what he was doing, as a Seanchan captain and her bearded Sojin pushed their way past Enid and into the kitchen. Jolene moaned and pulled herself harder against Matt when she heard the Seanchan accents. Matt saw the unshed tears in her eyes.
This is future Lajara speaking. We had some technical difficulties and the audio cut out here for just a brief moment. We'll return to your summary in just a couple seconds.
Her very best room, and Mistress Anand replied with the names and ranks of the 2 Seanchan who already occupied her 2 best rooms, with the remark that they could sort it out as to who ranked higher among whom, and who must go find other lodgings. She herself never kicked a Seanchan out of her inn as long as they could pay. When they left, Jolene Sedai buried her face into Matt's shoulder, weeping. He had to pick her up and carry her as they followed Satel down into the inn's well-stocked cellar. At the far side of it, behind stacks and stacks of boxes, bales, casks, and bags of produce, there was a little clear space. Matt sat Jolene down on an empty cask with a promise to himself to repay his debt to her. Teslin was not so lucky, he told her. Jolene spat contempt at Teslin Sedai's name. It seemed that Teslin had drugged Jolene when the Seanchan invasion began, to keep her from interfering with Elaine and Nynaeve. Jolene's 2 warders had carried her out of the palace and moved her from hiding place to hiding place ever since, dodging Seanchans constantly. Jolene's nerves were shot. Well, anyway, I'll help you as much as I can, Matt told her. I'm in debt to you. He said this thinking of the note warning Nynaeve and Elaine that he had found in his jacket pocket. You know, the one you left on my pillow, he finished. Jolene was dismissive about the note and Matt's debt to her. She did not lie, but she didn't correct him either, so Matt knew she was not the one who had left the note. Back at the palace, Matt was even more troubled about paying his debt. Uneasy, he slipped upstairs to the attic, which now served as Damane kennels. Matt carefully tried a few dozen doors, finding several Seafolk Windfinders and other women whom he did not know, before finding Teslin Baradon's room. Softly, Matt slipped in and asked her about the note. Why? Teslin explained that she did it to spite Elida, who wanted those 2 girls as much as she wanted the staff and stole of the Amerlin's office. I'll try to help you escape if I can, Matt promised her. She told him that Edicina Sedai must come with them as well. There were other Aes Sedai being kept as Damane, but they were too far gone, too badly changed, to escape. they would betray all of them in order to please their sultan. Leaving quickly, Matt almost ran into Tuwan at the stairs. Of course, she was always watching Matt. He told her that he had wanted to slip some treats to a windfinder who had once been a friend, but that he didn't see her. Tuwan seemed to accept his story, but warned him that the kennels were forbidden to men. Then she went back to ignoring that Matt even existed, and so he left. 1 Aes Sedai in a cellar, 2 in an attic collared by the Seanchan, and all 3 expecting Matt Cawthon to be a bloody hero and rescue them. He began humming the song, "I'm Down at the Bottom of the Well."
I like that Matt has a couple of good examples of really quick thinking in this chapter. One of them is, I think most obviously, when he starts pretending to kiss Jolene to hide her from the Seanchan. He doesn't give any indication in his thoughts ahead of time that that's what he's about to do, but he also doesn't seem surprised by his action like he sometimes is. But here his impulsiveness saves the day once again, as it often does. Another one too is when he thinks of a way to find out whether Jolene is the one who left the letter or whether it was Teslin. Now, I don't know if he thought up on the spot to word it just that way, to sneak the false detail of the note you left on my pillow in there, but it kind of looks like it was impulsive because we don't see his thoughts leading up to that involving how he had worked out this strategy or whatever. So I just thought those were both pretty clever.
To do that, just to spur the moment, throw that out there. Now, this is one of those chapters where even though we're in his head, we're seeing from his point of view, we're not privy to a lot of his thoughts behind the scenes. So we don't know if we've had those squirrel-like zigzagging thoughts leading up to those actions, or as you said, if it was something that was pre-planned that he had decided to do. But either way, however it came about, you're very, very impulsive, very spur of the moment. And you see, the one with Jolene, where he grabs her, starts kissing her, it's as if, he's so far ahead of everybody, it takes her a moment to catch up with what he's doing. It's what you would expect in real life. The second, with the detail about leaving the note on the pillow, is he's so far ahead, he's leaving the reader behind for a moment. I had to really stop and think about it. Wait, why did you say that? And then it hit me what he was doing. So both times he's a step ahead of everyone else, which a good horse trader needs to be. And as we know, Matt is the best of them. So, and a good gambler as well. They need to be a step ahead of everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Tom was right all that time ago when he told him you'd be really good at stones, the game of stones, if you really put your mind to it. Because he is good at staying step or so ahead of other people, like you mentioned.
When he goes into the inn and it's so overly crowded with Seanchan and Mistress Anon is not there, so he just wants out of the crowd. Especially a crowd of Seanchan, he doesn't mind being around people, but being around nobility always makes Matt feel uncomfortable. So his first impulse is to go to the kitchen, and he throws out that detail. Well, I want to tell Enid how much I enjoy her cooking. And then, of course, he does. He goes in and starts telling her how her gilded fish was better than what they served at the Terrace and Palace. So she gives him one for free, and that was, a really awesome gift there, especially considering one of the Seanchan officers out in the front, we're going to have to wait on their breakfast now because she'll have to cook another for them. These things just come spur of the moment right off the top of his head, yet they are the right things to do. Now, in my life personally, when I say the first thing that pops into my head, it normally goes very badly for me. That is not my nature. That's not something I need to do. I'm more of a careful, thought out, plan it kind of person, or else I'm going to stick my foot in my mouth every time. With Matt, when he sticks his foot in his mouth, at least it's funny, but the majority of the time it's him using his luck. The entire random thing. It's almost like whatever random things come out of his mouth or come into the top of his head, or whatever random thought or impulse that he feels. Those things are the right moves, and he does better if he follows with those or follows through with them. And we definitely see that in this chapter. Another moment of Matt's lightning fast thinking and thinking so quickly on his feet is when he is, has visited Teslin in the Damane kennels, who, of course, men are forbidden to be up there. Matt didn't know that, but of course, Matt did not ask the rules either. Matt just is Matt, so he's going to do what he wanted to do, whatever popped into his head. When Tuan sees him, he starts making up a story of a wind finder. Oh yes, I had this wind finder that was a friend, and I wanted to bring her some treats, but I didn't see her. So he completely takes any suspicion off any of the Aes Sedai. Even if he'd thrown a false name out there, he didn't even want them thinking of Aes Sedai. He wanted them thinking of Windfinders, because it wouldn't hurt his conscience as much if one of the Windfinders were punished for his actions as he would a friend and someone he knew. So he throws that out there, and then you see Tuan's reaction. Now, Tuan liked the fact that he was kind to Damane. I mean, she bought his story just at his face. It's like she had no reason to doubt him. Probably as a child of the Empress, she had never had anyone willing to lie to her before. So the thought didn't enter into her mind. Or perhaps he's just that good at lying that he was very, very convincing. But so she liked the fact he was good with the Damane and kind to them. And in a sense, to me, it's almost as if she was reaching out, trying to find some commonality with him, trying to find things in common. I still believe Tuan has this attraction to Matt. I know she has the fate that has told her that, whom she would marry, and that she's got to, I don't know about marry, but align herself with Matt. And so she's fascinated with him because of that. It knows he's fated to marry the daughter of the Nine Moons, although he does not know that it's Tuan yet at this point in the story. Yeah. So we've got that going on. She knows a little more about him than he does her as far as their futures and how they're connected.
Right.
But I still think there's an attraction there. I still think there's a fascination there. And part of it may just be the princess wanting someone who is the bad boy, the daring, James Dean type. You could definitely see if this happened in the United States in the 50s, he would be wearing the black jacket and have his cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve of his white undershirt. That would just be Matt. He would be that kind of guy. Anyways, I think she is searching for those things to find in common, because she, of course, has the ability to be a Suldam. She is trained to Damane and finds satisfaction in that. And then she brings this clue to him, or this admonition, I should say, to him. There are men who actually take Damane to their beds, she said. You wouldn't want anyone to think you are perverted. And so she takes this whole theme of trying to find something in common, trying to make a connection with Matt, and yet slavery it's even worse with Damane, because they don't consider Damane to be slaves. They consider them to be subhuman, to be much less than human, to have no feelings, no connection to humanity at all. And so the thoughts of sleeping with the Damane would be just like someone wanting to sleep with an animal. It's just terribly perverted and offensive.
Yeah, her explaining that to us kind of explains the degree of dehumanization, as if we hadn't already seen enough from Egwene's perspective and Matt seeing the Damane training as well. I didn't realize quite how subhuman they viewed them until she explained that perversion. Right.
And so, in her trying to find this commonality with him, she throws this detail in that could not separate her from Matrim Cawthon more than anything else in this world. I mean, had she come out and said, I'm nobility and I love heroes, it would not have affected him as deeply, as viscerally as does this. Because most everyone in a free society finds the idea of slavery and the dehumanizing of people to be anathema. That is just the opposite of everything that a free society appreciates. And in most of the countries in Randland, they are not, maybe European or American style freedom, but they are lands of free people for the most part.
Yeah, they're not liberal democracies, I guess you could say, but they're not oppressive totalitarian regimes or anything for the most part either.
Exactly. People are not treated as serfs. There is no even concept of slavery like we've discussed before. So, these types of things really, really proved to separate them more than she understands. I don't think she has a clue just how much he would find that statement offensive. Not just in the fact that he was personally offended, but just his entire society would be deeply offended by that point of view, not just the words, but just the entire point of view. So she's struggling to find some common ground, and either doesn't understand what a wide chasm of difference there is there, or doesn't care, because she's used to not having to care what anyone else says or thinks or feels on any subject. So just my thoughts, and that's all the notes I had on this one.
Yeah, all that makes a lot of sense. I don't think I had quite picked apart as much from that short interaction between the two, but you do see she's trying to make a connection, like you said, to find out just how well she could tolerate whatever type of fate she's supposed to have with him. And then at the same time, still showing that she views him and many other people as mere objects and not people. So there's a really hard tension of opposites there, and it makes their relationship so interesting going forward, because he does grow to have a very friendly attraction with her, and then it's still, she's drawn to him, but it's still not in a way that they're as equals for the most part. So it's interesting just seeing the germ of that starting to begin here, and we're going to continue to see more of it as they end up traveling together and stuff soon.
Right. Now, I will say in my personal reread, I'm a couple of books ahead of this now, and I've gotten to the point to where Semirog revealed that Xianchen is just in total chaos right now. She has killed the imperial family, and all of those are dead, and it's just in total chaos of civil war right now. 10 different factions all vying for the throne. So Tuon is in effect the empress. She just does not know it yet. But I have not come to the part where Tuon reveals how the fates have aligned her with Matt. We know how Matt is tied to the Daughter of the Nine Moons from his perspective, what he knows on that, but I haven't come across that, and I've forgotten a lot of those details, so I look forward to seeing that again in the story as I get to it, and it will probably shed a lot of light on things I've discussed here today that I sounded ridiculous on. It's just been a while since
I think that one comes pretty
part.
late in their in the series, in their interactions.
But anyways, it's still fun, and it's kind of cool to me to watch and look for these clues and realize there is somewhat, maybe not a relationship growing yet, but there is some interest there between these two. Matt looks at Tuon after he knows who she is and still thinks of her, this slim, boyish look, and I like women with a little more, flesh to them. And it's almost like he's trying to talk himself out of it, but he knows it's got to happen. But he still finds himself attracted to her. He will notice her full lips, and they look so kissable, and there are details about her that he finds very attractive. But it's just overall, he wouldn't have picked her out of a room full of women to go flirt with. But once he knew who she was, he just starts studying her and looking at her, and is interested enough to begin to find an attraction in someone he would not normally be drawn to. For a man who does not like nobility, he sure picked a noble woman, or the pattern picked a noble woman for him. Yeah.
I found a couple of more tidbits in this chapter I want to cover before we get to the next one.
Yes, please.
One of these is pretty classic Matt, much like his quick thinking that can look really impulsive, those like squirrel thoughts like you called them earlier. But it's not one of these, it's just a classic, similar to that being one of the things that Matt does. So Matt, all throughout this chapter, is denying his altruistic tendencies. He's trying to come up with a reason that he owes Jolene a favor to justify why he would want to save her and help her out of the city. Otherwise, he's a good bargainer. He's good at making money. He's not going to do something for nothing, right?
Right.
So he thinks anyway, but there is that part of him that is, his heartstrings are really being tugged by the situation around him. So when he finds out Jolene is not the one who gave him that note a couple of books ago, and that he doesn't technically owe her anything, he still agrees to this plan and agrees to save 2 more Aes Sedai, one of whom he doesn't even know. he keeps saying, okay, it's Teslin that gave me that note who helped me out, so I owe her one. I guess I'm just already in too deep with Jolene, and sure, I guess if I have to, I'll get Edicina too, but he really does care, and he really does care about these Windfinders too, because he notices in the next chapter all these commandeered sea folk ships, and he gets really uneasy thinking about it, and thinking about all those people that he feels powerless to help, but seems to want to be able to.
That brings up something, and thank you for bringing that out, because for some reason I didn't really look at it. I kept looking at him trying to justify it as the fact that he really wanted to pay back a debt. But you're right. That all of that is just to justify what he wants to do anyway, which is he wants to help, but he can't allow himself to feel things for people. So he's trying
exactly.
to find these
He's got to be in
justifications.
denial about his motives.
Yes. Oh, so I missed that entirely. Thank you for bringing that out. But the other thing that it made me think about, made me notice with him, he felt uneasy. He felt uneasy about the seeing the Aes Sedai being treated as like animals. He felt uneasy about seeing the Windfinder ships, how they've been taking over, commandeered. Most of their crew are out cleaning the Rahad, cleaning the canals of the Rahad, and the Windfinders are kept, again, chained as Damane. And I think one thing that made him uneasy about it is we see in Matt's personality, he has this penchant of ignoring things that he wants to ignore, or specifically not thinking about things that bother him. So we see that when something bothers Matt and he doesn't want to think about it, he shoves it firmly out of his mind and doesn't think about it, or does not allow himself to think on it or dwell on it. But really what that's doing is you can't push something out of your mind. What you do is you compartmentalize it within your mind. Yeah. And so over and over again, Matt is taking these thoughts of things he wants to do, or the impulses to help, to rescue, to be the hero. And he takes all these things and he kind of shoves them down. Almost think of it as a box in his mind. He shoves them into that box and he keeps ignoring them. And I believe what we see is that box is getting full and it's about to burst. This one of the reasons he must help, or he must find some justification, some way to help, because he has seen the injustices of the Shan-Chan. He's seen the injustices of Ebou Dar and other places as well, but just you could say the injustices of the world, and so many of those he's been unable to help, unable to do anything. So he just shoves those thoughts down. He compartmentalizes them. He packs it away. And you have almost an emotional dam within Matt that's getting ready to burst. It's getting ready to break open. He is not only going to help the Aes Sedai, he's going to try to help the Windfinders. He's going to try to help the people of Ebou Dar. He's going to try, and he's going to do it in a very big way. Of course, everything Matt does is as showy as Valen Luca without trying to be showy, the way Valen Luca is. But Matt is very out there. Everything he does is flamboyant without trying to be flamboyant. It's just who he is. It's who the pattern has made him to be. So, I see a lot of this is just that bottled up frustration and things he's constantly pushed down and tried not to think about, and it comes bubbling to the surface, coming up in a few chapters here, where he does make some big changes and catches a lot of people off guard. So just one of those random things that popped in my head when you said how he felt uneasy.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head about how his denial works and how it only works for so long, because you can't actually fully suppress thoughts like that. They go somewhere and they have to come back out in some way. Now, for Matt, I think that's often why his actions can seem so impulsive, because maybe there's some level on which he was thinking about doing that thing, whatever it is he does, whatever action that ends up surprising even him, because he's kind of constantly pushing down thoughts like that, and then they sort of just burst out.
Yes.
I think one other just really small tidbit in this chapter that's just a reminder of some of how Matt's mind works is his trouble recognizing Bail Doman, who should be pretty obvious to the reader as Egionan's Sojin, but Matt can recognize his face, but he can't place him. And it's just a good reminder of this big gap between the reader's knowledge and Matt's knowledge, because it's easy to forget because we have had so much experience with this guy and he's come back up several times in other people's stories that Matt was cursed Shadar-Logoth dagger Matt when he met Bail Doman. That was right after coming out of Shadar-Logoth. And so those are going to be some of his most messed up memories. So he's just got the tiny traces there, but he doesn't consciously know who the guy is. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's easy to forget now that Matt has built, or Taviran really has built such a new life for Matt, that just how much is missing from his old life.
Yes, that's well said. And it would have to be frustrating. I know at times I will see someone just in some public place and they look familiar to me, and I don't know from where I know them. And it may have been that they were the cashier at the grocery store, the one grocery store I went in 5 years ago. And I'm a person who very much notices faces. Mm-hmm. I don't remember names very well, but faces I typically do. And sometimes I will see them, and it will take a while for me to remember where I saw them before. And in Matt's case, you've not only got these memories, of people you've seen in your past, but then you've got memories from dozens, sometimes hundreds of other people. He often sees someone that reminds him of someone who has been dead 1,000 years or more. So if he can't place someone immediately, he shrugs it off as well. It must be from one of these old memories. And he doesn't think it over, let it, mull it around in his subconscious the way other people do until they finally remember who that person is or where they met them before. He just assumes, well, he looks like someone I saw or someone else saw, before the Trolloc Wars, so I just ignore it and go on with my life. When this was a very fated meeting, it was something that was very important, and Bail Doman, of course, this happens off camera from Matt's point of view, but Bail Doman did recognize Matt, and he brought that up to Aegenon later, and it becomes an important part of the story, so... But yeah, that would have to be frustrating to have those holes in your memory.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I can only imagine. It's like you said, it's tough enough to place faces and who they belong to. I've found that when I've moved several different places in my life, I find that if I meet someone in a new place, I think I already know them because they just generally look a lot like somebody from one of the other places I lived. And so I can easily mix them up. It's almost like some people just sort of come in types. Like you might even meet somebody with a lot of the same mannerisms and speech patterns. That's very true. I don't know if you've experienced that where, and now that I've been teaching for a few years, I feel like all that has really gone out the window, and even trying to figure out where I know people from. Because I just encounter so many more faces. And of course I can remember the name for the semester, but not after that. And so I can only imagine how much more amplified that must be for Matt. It sounds tough. But that's really all I noticed from this chapter. I didn't actually have a whole lot of notes on it. I think
we covered a lot of ground. So I'm interested to hear your take on the next chapter.
I summarized chapter 28, which is called News in a Cloth Sack. After Matt has agreed to help Teslin, Jolene, and Edicina escape from the city, Tylan informs him she is leaving town so that Suroth can show her just how much of Altara she now controls. To prepare for the opportunity, Matt has started to take Pips out of the stable and exercise him regularly. The horse was really restless, so it took all the horsemanship from ancient memories that Matt could muster. As he rides with Tylan to the docks to see her off on the trip, he sees a lot of the Seanchan blood, as well as some Sualdon with their Damane, one of whom is Rima Galfrey, who now goes by Pura, completely broken by the Damane training process. Matt can tell that she would scream for help if he took off the Adom somehow, and then he chides himself for even thinking of attempting that rescue. He's got enough on his plate with the other 3 Aes Sedai he plans to smuggle, so why was he even thinking of that? The harbor is full of trading ships from other nations, but disturbingly, it's full of a lot of Seanchan commandeered sea folk vessels. Matt can't help but think of the captured Windfinders and of the Wave Mistress who was killed for resisting, and how he can't think of a way to help any of these dozens or hundreds of women that might have been taken into bondage. Then Noel suddenly appears. He's kind of sketchy like that. He leaves the palace all day on mysterious business, and then he comes back at night to tell these fanciful stories. He asks Matt if he has plans, and so Matt answers, yeah, I got plans to rest this leg and take a nice bath after this, and Matt finds Noel harmless, but he's hesitant to tell him anything more than that. He's trying to be evasive. Noel insists Matt has a plan, though. He's been a lot of places, and he knows what that look on his face means. He's up to something. Speaking of, Noel also asks whether the golem drinks blood, and the answer is yes. Well, Noel says there was another killing last night that fits that description. The body totally drained of blood. If the thing ever left the city at all, it's back here for sure. So I'll be here if you change your mind about a plan and end up needing me, Matt, Noel offered. When he was back at the palace and into some more comfortable clothes, Matt asked Julian for some help, too. Julian seems suspiciously happy, though, but he won't say why, other than the fact that Suroth is gone. From this, Matt reasons out that Julian's new girlfriend must be one of Suroth's entourage that got left behind, maybe a Daco Vale or something. The guy seems absolutely smitten. Anyway, Matt needs his help. He figures that a thief catcher is probably just as good at avoiding notice as a thief would be, a thought that Julian seems pretty offended by, but Matt just ignores that and barges on with the plan. He needs a Suldam dress and an Adom so he can disguise Jolene as a Suldam leading around Teslan and Edicina as Damane. That way they could get through the gates. But it wasn't going to be easy. In the meantime, Matt keeps exercising Pips, he keeps watching the Suldam and the Damane, and he keeps finding Tuon watching him too. If only she had left as well. But Suroth and Tylan leaving was really too good an opportunity to even ask for in the first place, so he supposes he should be grateful. Obstacles do arise, though. He sees several Aes Sedai faces among the Damane, but he has no idea which one of them is Edicina, or how he can find out which of them he's supposed to bust out. And then Beslan interrupted one of Matt's meetings with Tom and Julian, where they were plotting how to get the women out of town, and Beslan starts talking dangerously about rebellion. Matt's really uncomfortable with this. He keeps trying to get the guy cooled down about it and explain all the reasons it wouldn't work, but Beslan doesn't really seem swayed. So Matt keeps him close after that, only if to keep an eye on him. So Beslan continues to be included in these meetings, but mostly to help prevent him from becoming a problem. The Suldam patrol the Damane kennels regularly, so that's another issue they gotta deal with, but at least they're unguarded during the night for the most part, Julian finds out. At this point, though, Julian still hasn't gotten the dresses or the Adom, and Tom finds out another problem. Even a Suldam can't just walk freely through the gates. They need a signed order from one of the blood, sealed with one of a few specific seals well known to the guards. So they don't have the means of copying one of these because they can't get their hands on one. On top of that, Tom lost his main informant, Lady Rizal, to a Shan Banner General Lord, so they can't get her or apparently Julian's girlfriend either to play the role of Suldam. And over several days, Tom struggles to find copies of any such orders so that he could convincingly forge some. As if things couldn't be worse, the Golem appears to be killing nightly now. The Shan seekers and listeners are just ready to question people sharply and to find the murderer. Matt is tired of having to hurry up and wait, and he's getting no good news. He's pacing a lot, though, to build up strength in his healing leg, and the pain seems to be subsiding a little bit. He thinks he could make it a few miles on foot if he had to. Finally, at the end of the week, Julian brings the news he was waiting for. More so, a cloth sack containing 2 dresses and an Adom than news so much. And thus ends Chapter 28, News in a Cloth Sack.
This is one that's so anticipatory because, by the way, I have a word of the month calendar. That was my new big word to learn. Nice. That was one which I anticipated quite a lot because I enjoy Matt's action chapters. We have had enough, skulking around, looking around, and you see it building.
Yeah.
You see the tension of Matt's story building toward the big breakout, toward getting out of Ebou Dar. And that's something I so look forward to. Again, in my personal reread, I finally, in my mind, hit the slog. And for me, the slog does not begin until Matt is in Valen Lucas' show, and then everything just kind of falls flat because there is no, I take that back. There's very little action. But here you see it slowly building. I like how Matt is trying to appear completely nonchalant. He doesn't want anyone noticing anything out of the ordinary, so he starts doing things out of the ordinary. But he starts doing them early, days before he actually plans on doing something, so it becomes routine, so people don't think anything about it. At least most people don't. Noel notices that Matt is doing some things differently, so he knows something's up. And Noel is very perceptive, and we discussed before how much he is like Matt, And I never saw that on my first read through, but really stopping to look at his personality, he is much more like Matt. I could see him as being Matt without someone to love him and who chose a darker path in life. And I think that describes Noel as being a very similar person. But hopefully, with Matt having the type of background he did in the Two Rivers, this more pastoral life that seems to be an ideal, not that he wants, but to strive for that kind of peace and that kind of level-headedness, I guess you would say, if that's a word. He strives for that. Everything outside of that to him is just people being crazy and insane. But he does, even though he doesn't want to go back to the Two Rivers, he does keep that idealized life as something to center him and keep him in reality. He's got that. He, of course, in Tuan has someone whom they will build a love relationship, someone to help him put down roots, in a sense, finally, we would assume, at some point in the future. And as well, Matt keeps making those right choices to do things for the good. Now, you're the one that brought up very early this season that it seems like every one of our characters are very suited toward taking a dark path. Yeah. Every one of our main characters, they take some steps toward the dark side, if you would, and you see how they could have gone far. Of course, Rand goes very far down it before he turns around, but most of the others, the struggle is a little lighter, and you don't see it as much, at least. But even Egwene and some of the others, they're very tempted to do wrong things for what they believe to be the right reasons. So I like that in Matt you see a person that will probably try to continue doing good things in his life. Now, there's going to be a lot of gambling and drinking involved, but he will still try to not walk the straight and narrow, but he doesn't want to be evil. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. He doesn't want to rule over anyone. So his personality is probably going to prevent him from walking a very dark path. But in Noel, you see somebody with similar qualities who didn't have those support systems. He didn't have that same upbringing. He didn't have someone there to kind of draw him back to reality and help him put down roots. And he chose a darker path in life. And then we know he redeems himself, and I love that redemption. But Noel is close enough to Matt's personality. He knows something's up. He doesn't know what's up. He doesn't know what Matt's planning, but he knows something is up just by Matt doing a few things slightly differently. But you see Matt do this a lot of times when he's getting ready for something big, something he has planned out, something he has strategized and worked toward. He will start making changes in his daily routine so no one notices anything. Yeah. Or when he does finally make his move, when he finally pulls the trigger.
Or he wants them to notice something different than what he's actually going to do. Like here, he knows that many of the servants seem to think that he's like itching to run away while Tylan's gone. So he wants them to think that that's all it is. So if he was seen publicly by everyone in the palace switching back into his old clothes and exercising his horse around very obviously and stuff like that, that when he leaves, it's going to look totally unconnected to the Damane escape.
Oh, well said. I didn't really catch that, but yeah, you're right. That is exactly what he's doing. It coalesces when you say it so clearly and succinctly.
And it's similar to some of the moves he's made with his armies before, like when he was supposed to start marching toward Samael. Boy, that's been a while. But when he was supposed to start doing that, he was supposed to make it unclear which day exactly he was going to leave and make it completely secret to anybody but him. So he just tried to keep up the same level of inspection every day, or maybe even look like he was less prepared on the day they were supposed to leave and stuff like that, just to keep people thrown off.
Right. And yet still left town with enough noise and things that it looked like, okay, he must have gotten some secret orders, because suddenly there was just this flurry of activity and they left early in the morning like they were trying to sneak away to throw everybody off the trail. So, oh yes, that is our Matt. When he does think things through, he has such, what's the word I'm trying to think of? it's not just incredible intellect, but I guess you'd say he has very good instincts on what will trigger people and what people will notice and remember afterward. And so he's, in a way, getting into their heads. He's trying to plant ideas there that will cause them to go the wrong way or do the wrong thing or expect the wrong thing out of him. So it's very much like a general on the battlefield. He wants the enemy to think one thing when he's actually doing another. And Matt does this in these situations where everybody except those few friends with him are the enemy. So he is using this strategy against the world at this point. Let everyone in Ebou Dar think, yes, they're doing one thing, and this is the only thing he's doing. And to a degree, that really worked. Because as far as I know, for the next book or two, he came under no suspicion at all. In fact, the disappearance of Egenin and Beldomen do not seem to be connected to Tuon. There were several things, that happened on that same night, and it caused just enough confusion. None of the events, at least from Suroth's perspective, none of those events have been connected for a month or so afterward. So very, very interesting.
Yeah. And you were right in saying that the tension feels so high in this chapter too, because we've been building it for so long. And we know that Matt doesn't handle boredom very well, so he's just kind of like, I think, trying to check and recheck his plans. He's, having to pace around a lot in pain, which it all just sounds miserable. Thinking about how difficult it is for him to sit around and wait anyway, but just pacing around to check, well, how much less does my leg hurt today? It still hurts. It's still not fully healed.
Right, yeah.
But it feels good to finally get that relief at the end of the chapter in the form of the news in the cloth sack. There's still some things unresolved. We don't know how Julian got the dresses, so there were all these roadblocks set up in this chapter. We don't really know how Julian got around that one yet, or how Tom plans to get his hands on the forgery materials or any of that. But at least we got that relief of, okay, one of these things is solved, and it feels like we're actually going to get out of here. It feels like there's a little more plot movement now.
I enjoyed looking into the details of this one, like Julian becoming upset when Matt asks him, well, surely you can think like a thief and know what a thief would do to steal these things. Seems like a thief catcher would be a very good thief if they wanted to. And the way Julian found it so offensive, he was very angry at that. But, I mean, that is true. To be an effective law enforcement officer, you have to be able to anticipate what a bad guy will do in a given situation. To be an effective security analyst, you have to know, what people will do. To be good at stopping hackers, you have to know what hackers will do. In any type of industry or field where you set yourself up as a good guy who's opposing the bad guys, you do have to understand what their motivations are, what they're likely to do, so that you can try to anticipate them and stop them. So you do have to learn to think like a thief in order to stop a thief. But for some reason, that just sets Julian off. And he manages it. He does it. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I could tell just on the few brief words that they had covering that, he was not happy about it.
Yeah.
He did not like being compared to a thief at all in any way, in any form, in any fashion. That was just terrible to Julian, probably because he has dedicated his life to stopping people like that. Just being compared to them in any way or saying, well, you might make a good thief because you know how they think. I think it was more of an emotional reaction from Julian than anything. Because we've seen him as a very thoughtful, level-headed person throughout the series. Very helpful. After he came out from under compulsion, I guess he was helpful the first time.
Yeah,
but just to the wrong people. But once the compulsion wore off, I believe he has sort of a feeling of debt, or he began staying with the crew here out of a feeling of indebtedness to them. But I've never really understood why he stayed, why he remained. All through Saladar and now the trip to Ebou Dar, he stayed, he and Tom, well, even Tanchico, now that I think about it, they've made several trips together, gone through a lot of hardships, been in a lot of fights in some of the rougher parts of town, just trying to get information or what have you. He and Tom got roughed up several times. So I think it might have been, after a while, just this fascination with, hey, let's see where this leads. These people, they're so interesting, and I don't know who's paying his way. I don't know why it's worth this to him, but it is. And
yeah,
now
he's not really well characterized enough for us to really get his motivations, I think.
Right. And things begin to pay off for him a little bit in this book when he begins acting a little oddly, and they understand, okay, he's got a girlfriend somewhere. He won't say anything about her. Then they begin to think maybe she's one of the Xianqian high ladies, because he keeps going upstairs to visit when he's not allowed upstairs. He's been beaten for going upstairs, and he'll get some ointment on the wounds and be back up there again that night. So he becomes very enamored with, of course, whom we know to be Thera. When we do meet her, she's not one of the Xianqian high blood. She's a Daiko Vale to Suroth herself. So that's one of those fascinating things. And then to find out Thera is short for Amathera, and that she was the Panarch of Terabon. Yes. And then she just so loves Julin for rescuing her, which is probably not the best motivation on which to build a relationship. But
right, it's a really unhealthy, unsettling relationship dynamic, because if she's that mentally broken as a Daiko Vale and that kind of debased, like, she doesn't have any power or any like choices in her life, and so it's she's in a very vulnerable position, and she's really just relying on the luck that Julin isn't going to hurt her, but he does, by just kind of nature, have power over her. And the power dynamic is a little unsettling. It just so happens that Julin doesn't seem to be exploiting that, but it's also difficult to tell to what extent somebody could have the capacity to consent to anything in a situation like that, to any kind of sexual activity or relationship, because of just, how could she say no? But I'm not saying that Julin is exploiting her. I'm just saying that the context of the situation makes that vulnerability very present. Right.
Does she really care for Julian, or does she care for someone who can get her out of that situation?
Could it have been anyone?
Desperate and that broken that, that she would just grasp at any straw, and he was that when it came out. We don't know it. But for Julian personally, who is an honorable man, and again, we see that by his being upset at Matt claiming he could think like a thief. Yeah, it does begin to pay off for him. He does begin to find love here, and that's always something I enjoy. I enjoy seeing people happy, even if they are fictional people in the story. I enjoy seeing people happy. So I like that, and here we're just seeing the edges of that, because everything that's taken place so far with her, concerning her, is off camera. So we don't know any of that yet. We just know he's acting strangely. Everybody knows there's a girl involved. That's the only reason a man starts acting this way, is because there's some good-looking woman involved. Love is one of those strange things. It does change people.
Yeah.
And then Tom's assertion when it comes to needing the orders with a special seal in order to leave the city with Damane and Suldam, that one was interesting to me, because a lot of times in stories, you always have someone who is a master forger who can, create the king's seal or whatever. And Tom, throughout the series, has been that guy. Yeah. He's been just the prototypical, can get it done, good guy but shady character type person. It's not the first time we've seen him try to forge something, but then he makes this assertion: anyone with a knife and a turnip can copy a seal.
Yeah.
That to me is, I don't know why that phrase stuck in my mind so much. It's like when I came across it in my reread, I'm like, yes, that's it. I remember him saying that. And that's one of the reasons those type seals were not very effective. That's just what they had. That was the most efficacious thing they could do at that point in time. So
he was excited to just want to copy somebody's handwriting. He's like, now that's an art.
Yes. Yeah, let me show you what I can do. Because most of the time we see the results of what he's done, but it all took place off camera.
Yeah.
This is really the first time I can think of where Tom has kind of openly admitted to that. I believe when they were in the Stone of Tyr, now he had a box of papers and things that he kept sealed up, with an inkwell and everything. That would be very damning if anyone found it. because he was getting trouble started between Rand's enemies, between those people who were set against him. And, he was arranging murders, and arranging for people to find out that their husbands were cheating on the wives or vice versa, anything to cause contention and to distract those people who were enemies of Rand. And he kind of alluded to having those things, but this is the first time I remember him talking to one of the other characters openly about that. And it's almost like he's wanting to show out a little bit. He's wanting to let them know, hey, I'm still a viable member of this group, and I'm still able to do some cool things. You watch this, And then the moment is robbed from him. But I guess we'll get to that next episode.
Yeah, I guess so. For now, we're still just planning. We're almost there.
Yes. We have the IDOM. We have the dresses. Yeah. That's one of the biggest hurdles.
I don't really have any other notes.
I hope all of you listeners will join us next week for episode 25 as we delve deeply into the mind of Matrim Cawthon in chapters 29, 30, and 31 of Winter's Heart.
Subscribe to Wheel of Mind on Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube to get notified when a new episode drops every Wednesday. And that YouTube one is under the name Lajara Dane instead of Wheel of Mind. That's LaJaraDayne. Leave us feedback by rating and reviewing on your preferred podcast listening platform, or by contacting us through email at lajaradane@gmail.com, or on Twitter at mind_wheel, or you can find me personally on Twitter at Lajara Sedai. That's Sedai. This is not the ending, but it is an ending to the turning of the Wheel of Mind.
Get her done.
We got some fan mail. Patrick from Australia contacted us and Matt is his favorite character, so he's really enjoying our season, and I'm glad to hear that, and was asking if we had thought about who we wanted to cover next. I pretty much told him, well, we got 20-something more episodes before we have to figure that out, so I don't think we've really figured that out yet. But did you have any ideas yet?
Right now, I'm leaning toward
Bella.
Oh,
yeah. There you go. The creator herself.
No, I've not yet decided. I think about it quite a lot on my reread. I try to pay attention to different characters, and that's a tough one. I just want to say I have this tendency. I want to go, since we covered a female our first season, male second season, I want to go back to a female. We don't want to just focus on those who walked out of Emmons Field together in the eye of the world, yet they are the more intriguing characters, and they are the ones who have the most screen time or the most point of view moments, if you would, in the book. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to weigh out and decide, but I have not decided yet, and I don't think Lajara has decided yet whom we want to cover in the next
I didn't
chapter.
have a clear idea either. I do know, we had been trying to sort of switch gender to keep it balanced. And I'm still also drawn to the Emmons Field 5 in general, like you said. We did a lot of analysis in season 1 that was kind of leading us towards Perrin, but the audience voted Matt. So I think we would have a good foundation if we wanted to do a Perrin one. But this season, we have been talking a lot about Egwene lately, and also Nynaeve. So I think any one of them would be very ripe for a whole lot of discussion and could be just as fun. But I think you had brought up before the idea of some kind of mini or buffer season with some of the shorter points of view, maybe even a few people with shorter points of view, and turning that into some kind of season before we go back to one of the bigger points of view. And I think that would be kind of cool. So if listeners have some ideas on characters they'd want to hear about in the future, just holler at us.
Or Rafe Judkins, we know you are glued to your computer every week when we drop. Let us know if that helps you in the show in any way. We will focus on a specific character. One quick thing I did want to throw in here that came to mind when you were talking about the personality types or something earlier. There was something I saw on a television news show or something quite a few years ago now, about a man who was a children's baseball coach, and I think for a young boys team. And he began noticing in the ways some of the boys handled themselves physically, the ways they ran, the ways their levels of athleticism. He was kind of able to group people into personality types. And he I think he may have even written a book about it or something at one point, but I couldn't find it. I tried to Google it earlier and I couldn't find anything on it. But it was very uncanny. He could watch a boy play for like 5 minutes and stand there and tell people, it'd be a child he's never seen or anything. He would tell them so many things about the boy's personality that it was just very unnerving, very unsettling. He could tell you how well they did in school. He could tell you the kinds of friends they had, just almost everything about them. Because we do have a tendency to group people into different personality types. I know in the business world, they talk about type A personality or type B, and that's two very huge, broad terms. And then some people divide it down further, and you can find all kinds of wheels and charts about people's personalities based on different things they have. But this one was one, for some reason, it hit me as being very interesting. And I know a lot of the personality typing or grouping people by personality, it doesn't work. It may appear to in the short term.
But it's sort of astrology maybe in the long run. Or sort of phrenology type thing.
Yes. Right. You begin validating what you want to see, or saying things that cause a person to act in a certain way, and you're changing their personality more than typing it. There are certain things about people's personality that do at least present themselves physically in the person's actions or the way they interact with other people. And so a lot of times, I'm nothing like that coach, but a lot of times I will see someone and I will think that is very much like a Bobby, and I'm equating them to someone in my mind who has very similar personality traits, and maybe not physical appearance traits, but something about the way they move, the way they handle themselves, the things they're going to do, the kind of jokes they're going to tell. You see those things, very, very odd similarities about those people. And I've never developed it down to a system or a science, but I very much in my mind group people in these little groups.
It's really easy to do. I think it's a way that our minds kind of just save space and save some energy. Is it if we can latch on to a couple of bullet points that are similar about people, it makes it a whole lot easier to remember stuff. Okay. All right. Hey.
I'm sorry, I thought you weren't recording.
Yeah, I know, but I knocked on your door a little while ago, and I opened the door. You didn't even hear me. You had headphones on and everything when I tried to tell you, so. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll get us started.
Oh my goodness, I just lost that thought. I just lost that entire train of thought. Oh no, after all the build up. Oh my. Oh gosh. Okay, hold on here. Let me retrace my thoughts for just a moment and see if I can get back to it. It's such a salient point. It's completely gone. I can't think of it. Oh my! It's something to do with him wanting to help, wanting to be helpful. Oh my goodness! Oh yes, I got it now.